Hi. If you know me, I don't usually teach in shoes, so first thing coming off is the shoes. That's so I don't fall down in front of you. I wanted to start by thanking you for inviting me to speak to you today and tell you my faith story. Sharing a faith story is a personal issue. And so there's some stuff in here that gets a little personal, especially at the end. And so if I cry, we have a Kleenex ready for me. But I practiced, so I don't plan on crying. I want to start with a picture of my family. So I have kind of a goofy family. They're sort of like me. It's my mom and my dad in the front, my husband and I in the middle, and I got 2 sons on each side. And spoiler alert, everybody in the picture is a believer. They're all Christians. They all love the Lord and get to spend eternity together. And I tell you that because I'm going to talk about atheism in my family and a lot of that. But I wanted you to see them, and I wanted you to know that they're just awesome. So I was not raised in a Christian home. I was raised in a home where my grandparents were Catholic, but my mom was very uncommitted. She said she believed, and then she didn't believe. She wasn't sure what she believed. My dad was an atheist. When he was 17, he went to seminary for about a half a year, got completely turned off, and became a very proud atheist. And I remember when I was young, my dad telling my sister and I that people who believe in God are weak, that they need to believe because they can't bear thinking that there's no purpose in life. Interestingly, with that background, my parents sent me to Catholic school, not because they wanted me to have a Catholic upbringing, but because they didn't like the local public school. So I went to a Catholic school. And in Catholic school, I received my first communion. That's the upper left. That's my sister in the picture. I'm going to talk about her later, too. And then my confirmation is the bottom right. I look like I'm about 9. I was older than that. I was in 8th grade. But that's me in Catholic school. And then I went to a public high school. Parents liked the high school, so they put me in a public high school. And that's where I joined Young Life. And Young Life was the first time that I was introduced to this idea of a relationship with Christ. But I wasn't quite sure I understood it all. They gave me a Bible. I read a Bible. And then I went off to college. And I was a biology major in college. I went to UC San Diego. Yeah, go biology. And a couple things happened. There was sort of a suite of factors that led me to become an atheist. First, in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, the Catholic Church made a few changes. One of the changes was you used to not eat meat on Fridays. And then I was around 83, 84. They made this change, and they said, okay, well, now you can eat meat on Fridays. And then they said another change. You used to not be able to get divorced in the eyes of the church, and now you could get divorced, but you couldn't get remarried. And I really struggled with these 2 changes because I thought these were rules that were in the Bible. And so I thought, isn't it written in the Bible, these reasons? And then they weren't in the Bible. How can you just change them? So that kind of started me having a lot of questions. Then I'm in my biology classes my freshman year in college. And in freshman biology, you take evolution as one of the topics that you learn about. And I remember the professor telling us that you can't accept evolution and believe in God, that they're mutually exclusive, and that you have to choose one. The basic argument was that evolution proved that there was no God. And I found this really puzzling. And so I met with a couple of different pastors to try to have a conversation with them about it. And they told me the same thing. You have to choose. And the more biology classes I took and the more I learned, the more there was evidence for evolution. And everybody told me you have to choose, so I picked biology. And I said, okay, you're making me reject God, I'll reject God. And I gave it all up. No belief in a higher power. There's no belief in God. There's nothing. And that's where I left college. So some of you guys that have been in my class heard this first part of this story already. Or if you saw the TEDx talk that I did here at Point Loma last year, I talk about this a little bit in the beginning. But don't fret because I move on to a whole other aspect of this in a little bit. But so I leave college. I graduate with my bachelor's in biology. And I'm not a believer. I get a job in a lab. and I'm dating a guy, Mike. And it's now July, a year later. I'm engaged to Mike, by the way, the guy in the picture, not Mike, didn't marry Mike. But I'm engaged to Mike, and I'm in this lab job that I despise. I'm synthesizing peptides for a living, which was just dreadful for me. If you know me at all, you know like I'm a people person, and sitting in a lab and dripping chemicals into things is not my cup of tea. So I was basically kind of miserable in my life and my relationships, and I remember it was July, a year after graduation, and I opened the newspaper because that's where I used to look for a job, because there wasn't an internet and monster.com. And so I opened the newspaper, and I see this thing, and it says, "Do you have a bachelor's degree? Do you need an adventure?" I'm not kidding you, it really said this. "Come teach English in Japan." And I'm like, yes, I have a bachelor's degree, and I need an adventure. So I applied, and 3 weeks later, I moved to Japan. 3 weeks later. These are a group of 16-year-old high school students that I taught, and I have no idea who the guy is. Some guy who got in the picture. I was sharing this with a friend yesterday, and I sent these pictures, and he texted me back. He goes, "How old are you?" I said, 22. He's like, "You look 12. Check out the hair, man. I always had curly hair, but that's pretty sad. So here I am in Japan. Now, this is 1989. Again, I'm going to keep reminding you of this. No internet, no cell phones, no email, nada, okay? And I'm in Japan in a rural town, and I'm very lonely. I sort of had a bit of an existential crisis, and I don't think I really knew what the word existential crisis meant until about 2 years ago. So what it meant is I was asking questions like, is this all that life's about? You just wake up in the morning, and you eat your food, and you go off to work, and you work your day, and then you come home, and you go to sleep, and tomorrow you wake up, and you repeat, and then 80 years later you drop dead, and that's it. Is that all there is in life? And I remember thinking things like, I'd come home from work, and it'd be a Friday night. I wasn't depressed, but I was having these thoughts. If I died tonight, like I choked on a chicken bone or something and died in the kitchen, no one would really know until I didn't show up for work Monday morning. So I was pretty lonely. They were kind of disturbing thoughts for me. And at the same time, right before I had left the States, the company that hired me said, "You're going to be in a rural town. Mail yourself some boxes of books." The town I was in had a library. Not one book was written in English. They had radio stations. There was not one radio station in English. And there was one TV show, Sundays at 2 o'clock. I lived for 2 o'clock on Sundays. Knight Rider with Kit, the car that talks. No, I got Mary Paul down here. Got Dr. Wood over there. He knows it. Yeah, Knight Rider. That was it. So I had mailed myself these 2 boxes of books. And it only took me about a month to get through the whole first box, or the whole second box. And at the bottom of the second box was a Bible. Now, reminder, I'm an atheist. So how'd the Bible get in there? I still suspect it was my sister that put it in there, but she won't fess up to it. In either case, I had nothing to do, so I started reading this Bible. And I don't know about you, but I find the Old Testament really confusing. And this God of the Old Testament, I have a lot of trouble making sense of him. And I just opened to page 1, started reading from page 1, and had all these questions. So I started writing letters to my sister. My sister's super intelligent, and she had maintained her Christianity. And so no internet, no email. So I handwrite letters to my sister. They mail them off to the States. She handwrites these letters back, answering my questions about the Old Testament, mails them to Japan. It was a really slow process. But after a couple months, reading her letters, making my way through the Bible, I decided to give my life to Christ and become a believer again. And then literally a month later, it was time to come home. So now I come back home. It's 1990. I'm back in the States. If you guys are doing math in your head right now, I'm 50. Okay, so you can stop doing the math and focus again. So I'm back in the States, and I decide I want to go to church. And my mom says, "Oh, I'll go to church with you." So my mom and I found this really neat Episcopal church down the road, and we start going to church. And I'm realizing that I need to start trying to figure out how to reconcile my acceptance of evolution with my Christian faith. And all I was hearing from everybody is, you can't reconcile them. You have to pick. And I didn't agree because I accepted evolution and I believed in God, so I had to figure it out. So I started kind of working on my own theology, which is, by the way, is a little scary. I don't recommend it. I realized I had to hide being a biologist and accepting evolution from all the people I knew at church. And I had to hide being a Christian from the scientists that I worked with. And that was tough, not being able to be who I truly was. And I was trying to figure out in the 90s, how can I love the Lord with my mind? So I know the verse is love the Lord with your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. I probably got those backwards. I could love the Lord with my heart, my soul, and my strength. But what did it mean to love the Lord with my mind when everybody told me I couldn't accept evolution? So that was really a struggle. There were no books. I could just go and find a book over the counter and read about how somebody did this. Fortunately, some books are written now, but there weren't any in the 90s. So it took me about 10 years to sort out my theology on this topic before I was willing to talk to anybody about it. But what I came to realize is that there's a whole bunch of parts of the Bible that are not meant to be interpreted literally. I'm going to give you an example. Genesis is not a science text. It's not written to give us a historical account of creation from my view and from many biblical scholars' views. In fact, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are really different. When you line them up side by side, they're really different. So which one's right? Also, there are a lot of different books of the Bible. They're written at different times, and they're written for different people. And when you read those books and think about the context and the people they're writing to, the messages they have are beautiful and profound if you're not trying to be too technical about it. So I came to realize that if I took the Bible on its own terms and not force it to answer questions and give me information that it wasn't intended to give me, that would allow me to take science on its own terms. And I was able to come to some reconciliation between evolution and my faith. And that was a good thing. And then some books came out, late 90s, early 2000s. Dr. Darrell Falk, who used to teach here, he's retired now. He wrote one of them. It was one of the first books I read about reconciling science and faith. And I realized my theology was a little off, but I was doing okay. So they asked me a month ago if I would come here and share my faith story, and it was very obvious to me that I would share you the story I just told you, because I've shared that story many, many, many times. Every time you take my evolution class, I share that story. But I didn't know what else I wanted to share. And I thought a lot about it, and I prayed a lot about it, and I'm like, okay, God, what do I need to say? What's going to be valuable to these kids? I even asked some students in my class, what should I share? What do I do? And I have a lot of stories and a lot of experiences in life. And then last week, a week ago, it was actually about 10 days ago now, 2 students at 2 different times came up and asked me questions. And I answered those questions, and I dealt with things, and I kept praying, what should I talk about in chapel? And I was like, ding, talk about this in chapel, because this is what students are asking you. So let me tell you about these 2 students. The first graduated a couple years ago. He's not here anymore. And he left PLUNU as an atheist. So he was not a believer. And we had some conversations when he was here about that. But we're Facebook friends, even though we don't really communicate as Facebook friends. And so he messaged me, and here's what he asked. So I need the slide. Hey, April, this is what he wrote. Can you explain to me how you went from being an atheist to being a believer in God? In a Facebook post, I'll just jot that down for you. I did. We actually had a Facebook conversation about this, and I wrote long paragraphs, all things you're not supposed to do in Facebook messengers. It's long, blue, long writing. But I did it anyway, and we conversed back and forth. The other person is a current undergraduate here at Point Loma right now, and she wanted to talk to me about why I'm a Christian, specifically, because she's wrestling with some doubt. And so both of these questions in the same week, and I said, yeah, I'll deal with how I connected from Japan to being an atheist to being a Christian. Like, what was that? He'd heard my other talks, but he's like, how did you make that link? How'd you go from atheist to Christian? And then why atheist to a believer, and then why I'm specifically a Christian. So when I was reflecting on how to write my multi-paragraph Facebook message, I realized that in Japan, accepting that there was a higher power was an intellectual move for me as opposed to an emotional one. So it kind of started as a mind pursuit and not a feeling. So I was searching for purpose. Remember, I was lonely. What's the purpose on earth? What's the purpose of the universe? What's the meaning of everything? Is there a meaning to life? And I realized it took me just as much faith to be an atheist as it took to believe in a higher power. There's no evidence to prove that there is or is not a God. But atheism left so many other questions unanswered. Why are we here? Who or what created all this? What came before? Whatever created all this? Why does life on earth work so well? And if you believe there's no higher power, you just really can't answer those questions. There's no answer. The answer is nothing. I remember back then the words of my dad ringing in my head, the words I told you earlier. That's not right, Dad. The idea that atheism is this rational decision for those with a strong character, and that deism was an unintelligent decision for those that are weak in character. Yeah, that's not right. That's not accurate at all. I found that accepting a higher power satisfies this desire in me for rationality. It allows me answers to so many of the harder questions that science can't answer. And if you believe in God, and if you view the world and the universe through the lens of a creator, this provides more explanatory power. There's this philosopher, his name's Peter Kreeft. I've started reading some philosophy in the last 3 years. Again, not a thing I recommend either. Sorry if a few of my friends, Rob, are you in here? Here's his quote. Peter Kreeft, he's at Boston University. It takes faith to believe in everything coming from nothing. It takes only reason to believe in everything coming from God. Ooh, I like that. That turns around everything my dad said. So during my time in Japan, I came to realize that belief in God isn't irrational, but it's plausible. To believe in a higher power, I don't have to check my brain at the door. It was later that this belief I had in a higher power became kind of experiential as I started cultivating a relationship with Christ. But that gets to the second conversation that I had with the student that's currently here right now. She might be in the room with us, but I'm not going to call her out on this. She accepts that there's a higher power, but she wants to know, like, why Christianity? There's a lot of religions out there. What should I believe? There are 3 reasons why I'm a Christian. And while I engaged in this conversation with her verbally, we just took a walk and talked, I had to write it down for you guys. And that was hard. It was harder than I thought. And I remember thinking, is this okay that these are my 3 reasons? What would a philosopher, a theologian, or a biblical scholar think of my 3 reasons? And it's kind of private. Like, what if you think my 3 reasons are stupid? Well, bummer. They don't have to be your 3 reasons. So I'm going to do a little more reading on this one. The first reason I'm a Christian has everything to do with the Christian story itself. This is a beautiful, beautiful story where God comes down as a human to save us. Other religions say that we have to earn our way to God, but I've found that no matter how hard I try, I never seem to be able to control the bad thoughts in me, the bad feelings in me, and yes, sometimes the bad actions. And I can promise you that if I had to earn my way into heaven, I'd never get there. I've tried. I keep failing. In Christianity, I don't have to meet a list of criteria to have a relationship with God. I only have to believe that God sacrificed his son for me and that I'm saved. I don't have to do things to appease God. I don't have to have sacrifices and kill animals. I don't have to have a relationship with him. Just get to be who I am in that relationship. There's something beautiful and loving and appealing to me about that, because I know who I am inside, and I know he loves me, and that's kind of awesome. Because I'm not sure if other people knew who I was inside that they would really love me. So it makes me want to live a better life, this love. And it makes me try harder to reflect the character of Christ to other people. And it's not because I have to. It's because I have the freedom to do that. I have the freedom to become more like Christ, and because of that freedom, I want to. It makes me think a little bit about, you have the freedom to choose to study or not. Your mom and dad aren't monitoring your every move while you're here, especially if you're a freshman. You're experiencing that freedom this semester. And because it's up to you, you want to succeed. It's kind of different than what you have to do. And that's a beautiful story. Second reason I'm a Christian is that I actually trust in this historical account of Jesus. I accept the stories from people that claim to have walked with Jesus. I rely on the testimony of the disciples. I believe those that saw the empty tomb. And there's 500 who are witnesses to Jesus' resurrected body. And I believe them. But for me, the role of the women really clinched it. They didn't crunch it, they clinched it. As a woman, this role of woman in the historical account is very convincing for me. Women had no authority 2,000 years ago. And the testimony of a woman in like first century Jewish culture, it was considered worthless. Yet it was a group of women whose testimony was deemed worthless. And they were the chief witnesses to the empty tomb. That's so awesome. We rock, girls. It can only be plausibly explained that they are the witnesses written in the account if they really were the witnesses. Because if you're going to make up a story like this, you wouldn't use women as the witnesses back in that time. So in short, I actually put my trust in the many, many scholars who state that the historical evidence for the resurrection of Christ is solid. It's there. They believe it. People try to refute it. It's still there. So I'm going to trust in that. The third reason that I'm a Christian, it's not as tangible as the first two. I call it my pillars of faith. I've experienced God a handful of times in a way that's touched my heart, in a way that God has communicated with me or touched my emotions and changed me, that I can't explain to you using science or reason. I would share with you one of these, well, I won't share with you. I'm not going to share with you one of these pillars of faith because this is a room of 1,000 people and they're really private. And they happen to me during times of extreme challenges in my life. But I know these are real. Sometimes when I worship, I can reconnect. I'm singing or I'm praying, and I can reconnect to that emotion. And it's just real, and I can't explain that to anybody else unless you've experienced it. You know what I mean. And it's not because I'm weak, and it's not because I need to have this connection. It's rather because experience is something I'm super certain of. And it's beyond anything that I can explain with my senses or with my science. It's one of the beautiful mysteries of God. So my message to the 2 students who reached out to me last week, and my message to you this morning, is that I have both intellectual and emotional reasons for my faith. But that doesn't mean I don't have doubt. So doubt, the opposite of doubt is not certainty. I learned this from some of my philosopher friends. So it's not that, the opposite of faith is not doubt. I said that wrong. See, my philosopher friends were nodding. April, you got it wrong. The opposite of doubt is certainty. So when I have doubt, that doesn't mean that I'm losing my faith, because they're not opposites. My doubt, I think about faith. I think about faith as courage. I have to have courage to be open to the mystery of God. I have to have courage to be humble. I have to have courage to face the me, that personal yucky stuff inside me that God loves. That requires a faith and a courage. So if you think about the opposite of, I forgot what the opposite of was. Opposite of courage is cowardice. I don't know why that word, maybe I don't like the word cowardice, so I keep forgetting it. But the opposite of courage is cowardice. So when I'm facing these doubts and I'm having these concerns, I can run from my faith, or I can try to be bold and stand proud. Now, when I had to prepare this talk and had to think about, how do I want to end? I don't know how to end. You got to end a talk well. I didn't know what to do, and I thought, well, I'm going to end my faith story. I don't want to end it with the impression that being a Christian is easy. But I got it all figured out. I know why I believe in a higher power. I got my list. I know why I'm a Christian. I got my 3 reasons. And so it's easy. It's not. So I'm just going to share a little bit in a room of 1,000. In the past 18 months, I've been struggling a lot in my personal life with a form of loneliness that's different from, it resonates with, but it's different from the kind of loneliness I felt in Japan. Here in San Diego, in 2016, I have a lot of friends. I have many, many friends. And I have an amazing, amazing, loving family. But there have been a lot of changes in my life. Both of my kids got married. You saw them up there. And they both moved away from San Diego. My husband has some pretty substantial health issues. And my husband and I have been having a rocky time in our marriage. So, there it is, that thing in the throat. I practiced not doing this. So while I'm surrounded by a lot of people who care a lot about me, I have colleagues, and I have friends, and I have students that care about me. When it comes right down to it, it's just me and God. I'm driving in my car, it's him and I. When I'm alone at the house, it's just him and I. And I got to work it out again. When I experience personal disappointments, excuse me, it keeps doing that thing that it does. I feel alone. For the past 25 years, I've been hearing, you can find your strength and your hope in God. We hear it in songs, and we hear it from people up on the pulpit. You can find your strength in God. What does that mean? When you're feeling alone, what does it mean to find your strength and your hope in God? How do I do that inside? How do I act that out? What do I do to experience that? I'm figuring it out in my life. So just like 25 years ago when I felt alone in Japan, I'm once again figuring out what it means to share my life with Christ. But there's a big difference between my experience as a young woman about half this current age, who's in Japan trying to find purpose and meaning in the world without God, and my experience now as a mature woman, I refuse to use the word old, I was looking to find strength and hope and peace in God. And here's the difference. I have a deep, deep confidence in the Christian story, that beautiful, loving story. The God who found me in Niigata, Japan, in the middle of nowhere, continues to find me in San Diego, California. And I am confident that if you search for him with your heart and your soul and your strength and your mind, that he'll find you too. I know I'm not the only one that feels alone right now, even though we're surrounded by people. Let me pray for us real quick. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for this beautiful story we call life. Thank you for an opportunity to share my trials and my experiences. Thank you for these students that listened. And thank you that we can just cry and yell and scream, and that you love us no matter what. Thank you for that. Be with us. Help us to feel you and help us to understand your strength, because I can't be the only one, Lord, who doesn't know what that means. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. You guys are dismissed.